So Jamil, it's an honor to have you here. 24th startup at this point.
Jamil Shinawi, visionary founder, active venture capitalist, and CEO of Ahoy, a pioneering MENA-based deep tech company revolutionizing movement infrastructure through AI and spatial intelligence.
I remember when I was doing a startup in Dubai, my general counsel, a lawyer, told me, you cannot speak about yourself that way. It's a risk. It's like, you can't say we messed it up. I'm like, whoa. So it is a cultural issue, I think. If you want to exit when the next year is going to be better than this one, not when it's going to be worse.
Last year was awful. That's why I want to exit. Next year's going to be great, so I'm not going to sell the company.
Greed is actually, I think, the worst thing ever in life.
How do you maintain that chaos and experimentation and excitement through the phases of a company? So before we begin with today's conversation, a word from us at Open Equity. You're probably watching this because you're looking to scale and exit or IPO your company successfully. Well, we have a wealth of resources that are designed exactly to support your success, from workshops, from free guides, from downloads and things like that. There's loads of links in the description. Now, one I want to highlight is a scorecard that we've put together that allows you to assess very easily what it is that's stopping you, what's holding you back from getting to the next level, what's holding you back from building towards that big exit that you probably desire and, of course, that you deserve. So head down below. There's a link to the scorecard. It's 20 or so questions. It takes about a minute to do, and you output a custom report that's designed to support you and give you some practical and actionable insights that you can implement right away and take things to the next level. Let's get on with the show. So Jamil, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time. You're saying you're flying in and flying out, so it's a real privilege to have you here. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. You're far too kind.
And we were speaking before, you're on your 24th startup at this point. So maybe we start with the present day, with the portfolio now with Ahoy and with actual VC.
Yeah, wearing two hats, not very common. Unfortunately, I think it's not common because especially in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world, people look at founders as employees, unfortunately. This is why people who are ex-Uber, I don't know, Amazon, whatever, who've been vetted by HR, essentially, or ex-McKinsey's, get easier funding. They're more compliant, they're less rebellious, and they're the founders they
look good in slide and pitch decks because they must be clever. Yeah, they must know what they're doing.
Yeah, but if you're like a founder with grit and you're self-made, or you don't have the qualifications, although you might have the potential, unfortunately get underlooked. And I think this is where there's a gap where a lot of innovative people are not considered. You know as much as I do that a lot of the innovation in the world did not come from people who came from legacy and industry.
I'll be honest, I don't know anyone, no offense to anyone who worked at McKinsey or works at McKinsey. So I'm sure it's a wonderful place, but I haven't yet met a ex-McKinsey person who's then gone off, started a startup, and it's been incredibly successful. I bet we'll have like 1 million comments now of people saying that they have. But it's just a different context, right? One is in corporate, making slides and things like that, and another is actually getting your hands dirty and building things.
I think there are some...
Why do you think it is?
Yeah, it's just good. It looks good for IC, and when you're a shallow investor, it's very easy for you to say, well, I invested in a good guy, or unfortunately a guy most of the time. But then I think one of the biggest challenges for investors, for investors in the region is that they stumbled on becoming VCs and they didn't do it from a foundational place. Like there is no true purpose or meaning. But I mean, it doesn't exclude that there are some really good people in McKinsey for a startup kind of founder material, but it's not mutually exclusive. The issue is when VCs make it the standard. And by nature of definition of what a startup should be, you cannot standardize. You want outliers. You don't want repetition. But unfortunately, you find something like, we want to invest in the copycats, we want to invest in the tried and tested, and we want predictable people to be running these as well.
And did you find that was because I think, was that the motivation to say, like, I think there's an opportunity to do something different, and I guess it plays into the name and the the point of view that you have at Actual VC?
So, yeah, big part of it, yeah, but it doesn't only go to the check cutting, because what I believe is that cutting checks is where your responsibility starts, not ends. Picking startups is not where the job, basically. And it's like saying, you know, I went to the supermarket, I picked the tomatoes, so I technically cooked the dish.
Yeah.
So that is not it. What you do after you invest is basically what makes you a VC. Unfortunately, again, a lot of the reason why we went with the name of Actual VC is we wanted to create a model that has better liquidity. So that's on the end. I'm gonna just take it from the back.
Yeah, please.
We wanted a model where we get hands-on with the startups, even if we didn't have board seats. We actually don't prefer having board seats. I don't want liability. I want risk, and I want risk that I can add value to. I want to have a relationship with the founder where I'm their jail bail call. I want to be the one who gets the bad news, not the investor just update that, you know, everything is good and suddenly we're bankrupt, you know. I want to go and integrate my portfolio, connect it, cross-fertilize, and invest in their downstream. I want them to think of me as their CVC almost, of their extension of their startup, rather than the opposite. In reality, a venture capital fund is an aggregator of money. And managing that money is a big responsibility. And it is not difficult to collect money and manage it for multiple different things. No offense to anybody in the industry, but that's not the job. That's not the job. The job is how we create value, how we stand up with these companies, how we help them actually productize, go to market, build in resilience in these companies, and help them actually find the way out so I can liquidate. The cross-fertilization, and you come from private equity, so you probably wrote the book on this, but when you have positions that are connected to each other, setting them off to a private equity fund becomes easy. I don't believe in IPO as a way to exit. I don't think IPO, I genuinely don't like the public market. And we try to cap the potential of a lot of growing companies and trade that off with predictability just to make it exitable, if that is a word. So, like,
there's a loads of digging here, because I think completely share your point of view, and it was a same, but in private equity, where same principle is, you know, there's lots of mega funds who can collect, you know, put together $1 billion fund, can buy lots of assets, sit on a board, and, you know, you have lots of people who put it on their LinkedIn, board member, and all of those things. But, you know, we've already spoken about McKinsey, but with, you know, Bain does a global private equity report. The finding last year was basically zero alpha added by the entire industry when you aggregated the whole thing, which is insane. I mean, it's as an LP, people should be screaming and shouting at that. That is, surely I'm paying the extra fees and taking the extra risk because you guys are great at multiplying the value of these companies. And if you're not, then kind of what's the point? And so, and it's a slight play on words, but with open equity, it was very much the, you know, there's an opportunity to do something better, which I always think is a good starting point to start a company. But I'd be really interested in that public markets thing, though. What would you just say? Keep firms private and have larger private companies like Stripe and others have just kept private, or what? How did you come to a point of view about public v private?
I think the US is a very unique case, and it's an isolated one too. But to take companies, for example, from the Middle East and list them in the US, I don't think that's a great idea as well.
I often see that as a kind of, it looks great in a spreadsheet and people explain it to me. And then you kind of, but in reality, if you take a company that has 90% of its operations in the UAE and Saudi and wherever, and you list it on the NASDAQ, you're not going to get this magic geographic arbitrage. Like, people see through that, surely. But
I mean,
do you see that happen quite a lot then? People try and play those kinds of games?
Unfortunately,
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, you understand the people in public markets want to tap into emerging markets or whatever is trending, you know, as a a means of, tapping into different growth cycles or whatever, or different economies, or hedging your risks or whatever. But I certainly don't think an innovative high growth company should be in the stock market at all.
Because of that quarterly pressure, or just generally?
It is, but also, governance, all the different controls and measures that you want to impose to make sure that the outcomes are predictable rather than scaling, fast. And that to me is a death of a startup and a birth of something else. It's not a startup anymore. We lost the definition on what a startup is and what a tech company is, and these things are not mutually exclusive as well. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of gaps in understanding, unfortunately, with all of people. But I know a few of my friends who make their money by taking companies private. Public markets, and I mean no offense by saying this, but whenever you add a lot of people into anything, you have to normalize almost to get an average of the IQ and assume the IQ of that collective cohort of people. We need to get along, so we need to dumb it down for everyone. And this is what happens in, by definition, what is called a public market. So your risk to appetite, your movement, everything becomes lower. The kind of people you need to put on a board become, subject to optics rather than practicality. And you got all these different things happening. Changes the spirit of your company, changes the culture of the company. It is actually extremely risky, in my opinion, to take a company that is not suited for the public market public. I don't know why people actually go and subscribe to that IPO. I genuinely don't. I wouldn't do it.
What, from an investor perspective, or from the shareholders of the existing company? Or
no,
both?
From the investor perspective.
No, I know what you mean. I'd be interested in that, because it's kind of there's always the pressure, particularly from early stage venture capital firms who then want or need to get the liquidity because they have a time horizon of a fund, which is a separate topic in itself and a problem. But I mean, often I've met a few founders who haven't really had a choice. They've kind of actually they've lost, at that point they've diluted so much, they don't have control of the thing, and then it kind of is taken out of their hands. But how do you, because you're a rare example, actually, someone who's taken things from seed through to scaling through to exit multiple times. How do you maintain that chaos and experimentation and excitement that is easy in the early days, but how have you maintained that through the life cycle as well, or through the phases of a company? Because that's something that very few people are able to sustain for all the reasons that you say.
I think it's a multi-component thing, in my opinion, and there isn't one way of doing it, but at least the thing that we've done was we first of all pick the right people who actually want to go really big, not go for targets. They believe in abundance, and they have this free mentality and free thinking, and are not just risk taking, but they don't have the ego to fail, and they're okay with it. Like psychologically, they can actually handle failing a lot and still get out of the bed and be motivated and push harder through whatever they need to do. But the other thing relates to the same comment I mentioned in public markets. You need to keep the units small. So like what we've done in Ahoy, instead of growing the company to 400 people organically, which we started doing and then we started declining, we started spinning off departments as companies.
Okay, yeah.
And when we did that, we created this rule where a company can't be more than 13 people. That's the maximum number. And if you had to grow more than 13, spin it off, put it in a business line. It has to be a coherent company with a purpose. And then if it was smaller than 7, then find other people across the company or the wider company to share that need with you. For example, you need people who do performance marketing, but you only need 2. And that doesn't constitute a company. It needs to be a minimum of 7. So you find everybody that is doing performance marketing, but nobody needs it. You need to lobby for it. You can't go get it from outside. Just outsource it. And this is kind of the system we built. Everybody's rewarded, and we call it TSOP. It's not ESOP because it's a bit different. And it's something that we actually open sourced recently and published. We have a framework where people are just rewarded on the main holdco level, and that organically enforces multiple things. It enforces collaboration in company business, cross-fertilization, optimization of resources, but then you don't need committees to run the show because people organically start clustering into responsibilities and, almost committees, but on an ad hoc basis to keep the ship moving. And the TSOP is awarded not just by time. It is a very simple formula of what is your margin versus the cost of it. So it's not about your top line, and it's not just about your bottom line as well. So we found that to be very interesting and exciting. To eliminate politics, we have also a timeline for people between 4 and 6 years, and then they got to leave.
Yeah, okay.
We actually don't allow people to stay longer than that. And whoever is leaving are not kicked out. They have to pick one of 2 tracks. Either you're going to start a company, and if you do, then all your liquidity that you get on your stock with us, you get 20% on top.
Okay.
And if you take the other track, which is the VC track, then we built our own platform to come and host your own fund, with our management license, so to enable you to actually go out and do that. And the same 20% premium that we give goes out. We're building a culture, we're building an ecosystem, we're building a mafia, we're growing very fast. And the main goal here is when you do all these things, when you do know that your time is finite, you observe your fiduciary duty better. You're working towards a purpose, and you really...
There's an energy there to get it done in the time. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And you wouldn't get precious, and politics and ego wouldn't get on the way. And I think this is the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an amazing answer, and I wasn't expecting. But to recap what you're saying, which I think because you kind of got to how you get to these kind of holding, because you've got the holding company, you've got many businesses, and then you're incentivizing people to continue to create new businesses and to stay in the ecosystem without getting stale or anything like that. I think that's a fantastic model. I've had lots of people try and do venture studios, and it never quite works. But you end up having, in my world, we tend to build decentralized holding companies in the kind of Berkshire Hathaway. You find established businesses, you kind of sit in an office and the team runs it, whatever. But I think that's an amazing model in terms of incentivizing and enabling innovation. And how did that start, and how have you got it to now? Because now you've got hundreds of companies within it, but what was the genesis of that? Because that seems like a very advanced model to have really nailed it down, but that must have come through some trial and error and experimentation to get going with that.
So like the genesis of Ahoy began with I had this piece of technology that I came up with during a pro bono project for disaster mitigation. And I thought that this is something missing from software engineering. And it is different to the way we do the intersection of computational physics and mathematics and software building. Software engineers are not educated alike, unfortunately. There's a huge inequality when it comes to education. And this is why you have variance. In a global world, you still have variance in how much people are paid per hour. And that is not a racist issue. It's not racism, and it's not because, of currency purchase buying power. No, it's because of capabilities are different. People who shine in certain markets because they worked hard and they had different education, they get sometimes to migrate or stay home and be paid what they're worth. What I wanted to build was a tech stack that bridges that gap. But here's the problem. If you look at the software industry today, I would say that there are 3 stations or 3 stops on the value stream or the value chain. You have foundational technologies, you have middlewares, you have wrappers. And well, if you build foundational stuff, your go-to-market is a very foggy, almost no visibility road. And this is where we were. And I built a company that really doesn't know how to go to market. And when we went to developers and engineers and tried to build a community with them and tell them, let's build with this stuff, they were like,
It's super. I've always found we've had a couple data platforms that have tried to go to market via developers and build community and so on. And it's like exactly as you described, it's always a nightmare. And trying to get, the very opinionated all engineers say, yes, I'll adopt it, I'll use that. It's normally like, here's 10 reasons why this is a terrible product and how I'd make it better or something like that.
Now, the other challenge is if you can't even get a customer, do you think you can get an investor?
Yeah.
So you go to investors and tell them, this, that, and, this is the Mandelbrot set and physics and blah, blah, and, and changing software and how software is built. And I remember one of the OGs in investing in the Middle East. He was one of the guys who actually helped Steve Jobs come back to Apple. So the guy is one of the OGs as an investor. And he kind of looked funny at me and said, you think you're Google or what? Like, you think you're Google? What are you talking about? And I realized, if this guy doesn't get it, there's something wrong I'm doing. So I basically decided with my team to go and build a product with our technology and demonstrate that our technology our tech stack can actually yield a non-comparable output at cost, at quality, at features, at everything. So we started with the intention of wanting to build something to replace Uber. And we even spoke to Expo at the time to actually launch it with Expo.
And for those who don't know, you're going after, I think, like going after logistics and transportation. That's like hardcore, deep tech. That's like, we're not messing around. We're going after a hard problem.
And the beauty about the foundational sciences there, operations research, OR, it gets into everything. From how your cell network works to how your traffic engineering is done on the city level.
Yeah.
To how your electrical grid is functioning, all the way to doctors researching cardiovascular diseases. It is the same formula. So we knew we have something that is very potent and will take many years to actually go to verticals. But we need to pick one area, and one area where investors would actually be okay. Now, when we entered into this, we noticed that it's a regulated area. There are a lot of government fees. The competitors are quite big. And we just scrapped the plans, and I didn't want to throw the code base that we built in the front end and the product. So I told everyone, why don't we do supply chain? Something that merges the middle and last mile and, does it on a very ad hoc basis. So we built a product in that, and it coincided with COVID. And when COVID, lockdown happened, in 2 weeks, we refined our approach even furthermore, and we went to cold chain specifically. And what happened there, we became the go-to guys to deliver groceries, food, medication, not just to homes, but from origin through multimodal, aircrafts, ships, and everything, with telemetry, with IoT that's very cheap to afford. And that was our product one. Then you had all this tech startup media saying that we're a logistics company, which is not true, but it helped us raise funds. And we transitioned immediately to aviation after that. Just
another really, really hard to go after industry.
Exactly.
Very stale, set in technology from the 1970s, maybe.
You're generous.
Yeah. But I think before we go into, because I think there's two, like, massively, like, because I think it's easy to lose some of those, like, what's easy for you isn't easy for everyone. But one, going with, you found something foundational, and then you realize actually we kind of had to make it useful by building something on top, which is a similar principle with, OpenAI had GPT, and then they had to make ChatGPT to make it useful, and then it took off. But the tech was, the API was there for many years before, and people didn't. And then the second thing is then niching down. I meet so many, particularly early stage or first time rather than 24th time, who try and go try and go horizontal, and then they don't have a clear target to go after. Whereas you kind of you made the thing useful, and then you went to a very specific niche, and then you started expanding out to other verticals, which I always think is a much more battle tested way of going about it than trying to do everything all at once.
See,
but,
the challenge becomes also that we appealed to investors. Then we started aviation, and all investors went and raised an eyebrow. And they were like,
well, they all said what I said, is aviation sounds hard.
Not really. Okay. I would actually take that comment.
Oh, okay. What did they say?
They all said, you're not focusing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You should just take that one product you got. But I told them, guys, I got this like tech at the back, and I need I don't care about this product. They're like, so who's going to sell the product? Like, not me. So what do you mean? I built this model where I go to system integrators and implementation partners, and they handle the distribution, and they only looked at the margin that we didn't make. So venture capital became untouchables to them.
Surprising risk aversion, is it? I mean, I always find with risk, I'm like, when I speak to venture capital, your job is literally to take as much risk as possible. That's what this is all about. And yet it seems crazy that actually, a multi-time founder who's got a great track record, who's proven a thing here and has a good, reasonable path to go across verticals, they even say no to that. Like, what more do you want?
I mean, I remember one of the leading figures in the VC ecosystem here in Dubai, and he said to me, you didn't graduate from MIT. You didn't graduate from MIT. You don't have a PhD, and you haven't worked in any great company.
Okay.
I told him, in fact, I was never employed. And he looked at me funny. But that is the sort of legacy thinking that basically is, I think, harming the potential of the region, to be honest. A lot of the investors believe that there are men and women that deserve funding and others that don't. And it doesn't matter if you have a track record of doing it or not. Do you actually fit a mold or you don't? Unfortunately.
Do you think it's more so here though? Because I would say, coming from the European or the American ecosystem, the same to some degree happens there. Is, did you go to the right school? Do you have the right credentials? It certainly means the door is easier to, and there's a gender thing too. It certainly is easy to get the doors open, unfortunately. But do you think do you think it's more so here, or do you just think that's just an endemic thing that risk averse investors
it gets worse in certain geographies where nepotism exists, where you have cultural norms that kind of encourage this, so it's probably the least bad in a market like the US, depending where you are in the US as well. But then as you go east, it kind of gets worse a bit. I mean, it gets a bit better maybe in China, but China is a
closed
challenge. Yeah. Although
an acceptance of failure, because like you say, I think I found with the US, as opposed to, for instance, in the UK and Europe, often people talk about fail fast and fail, but not really, because actually there's still, if your last company failed and etc., so there's still a bit of a tart. Whereas the US does seem to be a bit like, oh, you failed, come on, let's go again. But how have you found that attitude to failure and knowing that you maybe need to back someone a few times before they really hit it out the park?
So I started startups in the US, Africa, India, Middle East, and Europe. So I had UK.
You've seen it all. Yeah.
So the thing is, the nice thing about the American way is that they have this abundance mentality and very low egotistical approach to it. I remember when I was doing a startup in Qatar once, and another time in Dubai. I had different people, and one of them was my GC, and he told me, my general counsel lawyer told me, you cannot speak about yourself that way. It's a risk. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, you can't say we messed it up.
Oh, okay. What? Because an investor would then come after you saying,
he's like,
"You
it's
made
an
a mistake."
admission of guilt. I'm like, whoa. So when you go farther east,
That's
where you have
interesting.
cultures where an apology is only accepted when it's
Yeah.
accompanied by tears.
Yeah.
So it is a cultural issue, I think. But I think
It's funny because you're just being humble and honest, and actually it's really useful to admit we made a mistake, we're going to improve it. But yeah, I can understand.
You can't make a cake without breaking some eggs, right?
Yeah,
So
right, exactly. And speaking of that, one thing we were talking about before is first-time founders I meet are very excited and enthusiastic, and lots of exclamation marks in emails and lots of emojis and things like that. And when you've gone through many companies, particularly if you've had highs and lows, as everybody does, you start to get this steeliness. And do you think did you always have a bit of a coolness about it? Do you think it's something that actually over the years you've just become, more calm and emotionless? Because I see it in actually the more experienced people, they're completely devoid of emotion when it comes to just getting on with something business-wise.
I think it's true to me, like everyone. You just get better at it, right?
But did you, I mean, I appreciate you were very young when you started your first companies, but over time, have you become more cold and rational, or is that just an innate thing? You've always had that, and that's a trait in you?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Did you start with a very excited, puppy dog excitement, and then you get smacked in the face and you get a bit cooler about the whole thing? I don't know.
I mean, the ironic thing is that the way I started was, it was completely by accident. I didn't even know that I was doing a startup. I just was working on something I was very passionate about, an idea I had. I want to do it for me. And when somebody told me that they wanted to acquire it, I went and started the company to house it in it, to actually be able to sell it off. But that was a blessing in disguise, because if you succeed in your first go, the cockiness and ego you come with is extremely lethal. So I got face planted in my second startup. I was properly humbled, but not enough. And then you I don't know. It's like, yeah, I had almost maybe a non-traditional journey, but I believe a lot of the founders that come with excitement at the beginning face a lot of challenges with fundraising. They either choose to be traumatized by it and act as a victim.
Yeah.
Which I understand actually, but it doesn't really change anything, unfortunately. Or they muscle through and do it, and there is a third cohort that just quietly goes out and just get out of the game, and that's it, and get on with life. So that excitement is, as I agree with you, you start like a little bit excited with a bit of ignorance, innocence, and you go by, and then. But
maybe you wouldn't start. I mean, I'm thinking about it because my first company, which was a marketing agency, and I was a lot younger, and yeah, I mean, in hindsight, like if me then spoke to me now and presented that plan, which there wasn't a plan, there was no capital, no clue, no product or service really, no reason why this might be different or better or interesting to whatever. It was just like, well, I'm going to get. I want the autonomy. I want to give it a go. I'm excited about this thing. This topic interests me, I think, and then you get smacked in the face for a period of time. And I think over time, I found I had to learn. You almost learn by experimentation about what works and what doesn't, even in terms of shaping a proposition or telling a story or doing a pitch or doing a whatever.
But at the same time, it's quite unfair for yourself today to look at that and give it guidance, because it was essential to
True. Yeah.
to kind of make who
true.
you are
Yeah.
today.
No, I
right?
don't regret it. I just,
No, it's like
I just look back at it and kind of think, oh, what was I thinking? You know what I mean?
I know.
Yeah. Before we continue with the conversation, a quick break because I want to tell you about our new series of live workshops where we have a conversation about how to scale and exit or IPO successfully. These are intimate, these are focused, these are very tailored to your questions. I will be hosting them personally. You can learn from my 10 plus years of experience scaling companies to hundreds of millions in revenue and securing exits, even helping to take companies public. If you're interested, you can sign up below. These are only shared with the people who sign up to the link. These are very much behind the scenes where I can share, much more that I can't tell you about here. So click below, sign up to the link, join the workshop, and on with the show.
But it's that sort of rashness to it.
Yeah.
Like when you are not wise, is how you probably learn.
Yeah.
But also within that, it lies a lot of potential. So because you actually don't know better, you wouldn't take the perceived wisdom to actually do the mistakes that could yield something that nobody imagined. So that's what I hate about a lot of the mentorship, a lot of the venture studios, a lot of the hand-holding.
Trying to fix it into a box that, as opposed to allowing someone to find their own path.
I mean, we can all play bowling, but if it's, you're going to have the rails up the whole time, it's not fun because something is always, I mean, as provided as, as long as you actually throw a ball in, you're going to hit something.
Yeah.
And that's no fun. I mean, real estate is better, so you can go just invest in real estate and, make standard money, Bitcoin or gold, bonds. There are tons of options for investment, but
you've gone deep tech, which I admire because that's like, there's always going deep tech into logistics, into aviation, into transportation. So I appreciate this. Maybe you didn't start there, but you're saying the entire progression has always been deep tech, and you never thought, let me make a consumer-facing app or something simple or easy. You always thought, I want to go after hard problems. Or is it hard problems, or just I find this problem interesting and so I'm going to go after it? Like, what is the motivation behind attacking each thing that becomes a company?
Yeah, I mean, it was curiosity. I mean, I had a phase where I was just fascinated with the organic chemistry. And I wanted to build a software that can make new compounds. But my problem was, what is the user experience there of this scientist or material scientist that want to, make a material? So I started looking at cataloging technical data sheets of different compounds and trying to reverse engineer from what you want as for example, a flash point and a melting point of a material to go back and get you how to get that done, and then improve the product to go on a SCADA interface to plug into a production line and make it. So that was one of the startups I built in the past, and I actually didn't know what I was doing until the moment somebody gave it purpose, and I was just curious. And I think following your curiosity and not calling it a startup is something worth doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great lesson there, because so many people I meet who said, okay, I'm going to go after a bit of, I think there's an opportunity in AI and blockchain with a bit of the Uber for this and da-da-da-da. And they've reverse engineered like what they think is a cool thing, as opposed to, I agree with you, when I meet someone who's, with a starting or thinking of a company saying, yeah, I got really into organic chemistry and I found that actually there was blah, blah, blah. And I eventually led to there's a better way to do cooling in data centers as a result of this, rather than someone who's like, well, I think that because the market size here and I saw in a McKinsey report or whatever it did this, but that follow your curiosity.
Like, because of actual VC, we get to meet a lot of these cool people as well.
Yeah.
And one of the guys I met, he had the most shocking background. So he used to work in a zoo. And he tended for the gorillas.
Amazing.
Cleaning their area, basically.
Yeah.
And one day, as he was shoveling, he took the stuff and went to a doctor, a veterinarian that works in the zoo, and he asked them, why are gorillas so buffed like they work out. They don't eat protein. They're only eating these greens. How come they're so muscular? And the doctor said, that's an interesting question. Let me look it up and get you an answer. And this guy is just a keeper with a high school degree. She came back to him and she said to him, basically, well, there is this enzyme in the gorilla gut that takes carbohydrates and enables the creation of mitochondria in muscles, so they become, muscular, and it's the way their gut works. So he took samples and he went and he tried on his own dime to isolate it.
Wow.
And he was able to reproduce it in a bioreactor on the bench, then scaled it up. And today he's making it into food to replace a chemical that we use today, which is titanium dioxide. So from your painkillers, the pills, while they're white, that's titanium dioxide, all the way to your donuts and why glazed sugar does not break apart when you take a bite, that's titanium dioxide. So he went and he said, I'll replace it with this. And this enzyme does not only make you consume food better, but it prevents diabetes, it prevents cancers, because you basically are breaking sugar way better. You don't gain weight easily. You can have your guilty pleasures easier, basically. And that is the sort of thing that a very simple person with just curiosity. I mean, curiosity is better than 10 PhDs, in my opinion. Not that the PhDs are useless. We need research. We need scientists. And they also create great things. But very rarely they actually are able to commercialize. We always speak of something which we call the scientist dilemma and the inventor dilemma. The inventors usually cannot productize, but people who have curiosity usually do. If you combine both, you have an amazing combination. It's very rare that it happens, but yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I've been speaking to a couple of universities about some kind of explorative kind of renewable energy technologies that they're looking at, but it's very much in the kind of early stage academic, lots of deep research and things like that. But how would you go about commercializing that piece? Because I found, I meet lots of people who are very, who are able to kind of find this deep insight that's fascinating and interesting, whatever, but then turning that into commercializing it, turning it into a company, scaling up a team, particularly being able to commercially sell that and start generating revenue, which often is kind of pains their academic soul to make money and do things like that. But how do you help take people from academic breakthrough or even curiosity breakthrough through to commercialization and scaling up?
It's funny you said the word soul there. But this is it. A good idea without the right team is like, body without soul, really, It's all about the dynamic and having the right team, honestly. And I get investors who say we invest in people. But you invest in people when there are good ideas.
Yeah, it was
not
a bit
when
like
they're trying
every
to copy.
company says we're founder-friendly XYZ. Yeah,
unfortunately. But a lot of universities, unfortunately, are their own worst enemy with their spin-off programs and charging their academics a percentage of whatever they make, and it's like modern slavery here. But if somebody is a scientist, I don't believe they should leave their line of work to actually commercialize. And what universities should do is actually work on releasing or detaching that science so it can go ahead as a product rather than making it the topic of research or taking away the researcher.
So rather than turning the researcher into founder, CEO, etc., you should accept that the researcher is great at researcher and then maybe put a team who can take it through.
100%.
Okay,
and I believe the only proper reward to this is not royalty based. I believe equity is
equity to the researcher.
Equity to the researcher, and if the school they need to tax him for it, then that may be it. But you can't expect a startup to come and give you an offtake and for you to have an IC and, and a commercialization committee and, that, basically spends 70% of its time fighting about parking lots. I mean, universities are great, but outdated as well, and are becoming increasingly irrelevant, except a few that are trying really hard. But the majority of universities are just genuinely useless. Even if they can produce a lot of research and have huge portfolios, they're utterly just a waste of time and money for young people.
And would you encourage more people to go into entrepreneurship, or do you? Because often I hear people say, look, higher education is outdated. We should have more people that go and be entrepreneurs. But then I kind of, with maybe a steeliness, would look at it and say, not everyone is made to go and start a company, and yes, that's great for some people, but also we need some kind of solution for other people. What would you say is a good way to balance that? How do we educate the next generation a way that they can find their path that fits within the broader ecosystem?
I think the easiest formula that always worked is to try and be happy. I know it sounds very cheesy, but it's true, because if you didn't have some artists, and if you didn't have some scientists, and you didn't have some people in between that bridge that gap between the two, life would be really boring. And we wouldn't have people to consume the products that we make.
It's interesting because you often hear everyone pushes STEM and science and technology as science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But there's also lots of people I've met who they're a fantastic ballet dancer, or they're brilliant at classical violin. And if I tried to, or they love metal music or whatever, but like if I tried to force them into a box that they now need to be a mathematician and do maths till they're 21,
bring an industrial engineer to a chef, and they'll teach them a lot about emulsions than what they've studied in school. And it's just true. I mean, this is the thing where we need to be a lot more open-minded and a lot more humble, to where we actually get good ideas. Life is genuinely, there's beauty to life, and genuinely there is potential everywhere and in everyone. Even that they might seem useless to certain somebody, but there is potential, and you cannot just discount anybody.
How do you? Because you will have hundreds of founders knocking down your door to try and take a piece of the fund and the next fund and so on and so forth. How do you then, within that belief, which I share the belief that everyone has potential and it can be nurtured and everyone can be great and all of that, but at the same time you've got a commercial hat on and a duty to then invest wisely. How do you assess, how do you make choices around who do I invest in and who do I think we can really unleash potential versus what, this person isn't right for this and not sure?
So when it comes to actual VC, we actually designed a very specific thesis. We want to be the people who invest in companies that redefine sectors. We don't want to invest in verticals and sectors.
So you don't want to do Me Too type thing. You want to do kind of game-changing stuff.
By definition, actual VC is a deep tech fund.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about deep tech is there is no definition. Because if there was, it's probably not deep tech. And AI used to be deep tech. I assure you right now it's not, because it's mainstream. And every once in a while, as we progress, the definition, what is considered in the purview of AI keeps changing. But there are things that have been almost always true to be deep tech. And those are industry and engineering, like in material science. Life sciences have always been and will always, I think, be as well there. And information sciences, the way we process knowledge and information and the infrastructure and the tools behind that. And as we thought that we're peaking in technology, suddenly comes LLMs. People think LLMs are a huge grand step, maybe for our time, yeah. but in the grand scheme of things, it's not even an inch, in my opinion. It's great. I'm not discounting the breakthroughs or the progress that we've made, but it's very, very, very small step. And when it comes to investing, these are the areas in actual VC that we look at. But then you need to look at the crossover of these areas, because there are companies where you don't know if it's an information or a material science company. For example, there's a company out of the UK, and one of the greatest companies I've seen this year. They make chips from purely carbon, not silicon carbon, like just purely carbon. They invented the lithography.
Amazing.
To do it on carbon, and not any carbon. They do it out of graphene, actually. So there is this thing that I fell in love with in the UK, by the way, between, I know Manchester came up with the discovery of graphene, but Oxford and Cambridge really honed on it in industrial use cases. And between Oxford and Cambridge, there are few companies that are actually changing the world when it comes to this overlap of material science and information sciences. So in actual VC, we try to find these overlaps and these areas in a foundational technology. So we would deploy at the first instant of the fund that, and then we want to deploy to companies that are using these technologies. And this is how we build a value stack. A value stack is the perfect packaged liquidity opportunity.
Okay, so you go through the whole value chain and say, well, if I'm investing in, I don't know, the application, no, you wouldn't be in the application, but if I'm investing in, next generation data centers, I'm going to do the operator, but I'm going to do all the pieces. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the whole, I'm going to go down to renewable energy. I'm going to
And
so you get the whole exposure to the whole piece.
That's why you have a team of like 30 people in actual VC. Some of them led the material science and chemical research for companies like Aramco. Some of them advised even the White House for life sciences. Everybody we have is extremely scientifically specialized. And then you have people like me who are
can balance the science and the commercialization to some.
Yeah, like I'm an enthusiast. If you think about it, I'm a hobbyist. I'm deeply entrenched technically in all these areas, but I'm not a specialist.
Yeah.
But I have a commercial eye. I can do proper, portfolio management, but this is how a team comes together to deliver that value as well. And I know, actual VC is my first fund, but I've done this before in a syndicate, and we liquidated at 42x. That is not a normal return.
No, not at all.
We had a success rate of 70% of the companies in the portfolio, which is high. So
across what? Across how many
years?
No. How big was the portfolio?
Around 63 companies.
Okay, so it's a good sized portfolio to get 70% across that. It's way, way high. I mean, in VC, normally what it's like 5%, 10%.
But the funny thing is because of the strategy we deployed, some of the companies that failed and were not commercially viable because they were basically not a medicine, a vitamin. The difference between a medicine and a vitamin is...
No, but let's talk about it, because I think it's really important.
There are companies that are a feature, not a product, or a vitamin, not a medicine. So it's a supplement, not a cure, really. And
it's like mission critical v trivial. And as soon as there's a downturn, it gets cut off, versus you have to have that. You're always going to pay for back pain relief.
Exactly.
You're always going to get your wisdom teeth removed. You're always going to,
But these companies sometimes are extremely valuable in the value realization of another company. So they end up acquiring them. The challenge is, how does a company that doesn't make any money acquire another company? And it has to be an acqui-hire where the teams actually feel passionate about coming together and join forces and merge in equity and do an equity swap. And this is basically one of the best things we've seen happen between companies. We try not to get involved, but
where they naturally decide we're going to merge, we're going to do an equity swap, we think we're better together. That's interesting. I often find that's a completely overlooked thing, particularly for smaller companies. Advice I often give to not to deep tech companies, but actually if they got some of their key suppliers who they're already best friends with and they do business with and have known each other for years, if you could actually merge those 4 or 5 together and you can, fit a fit a structure around it, everyone is better off. Like the sum of the company is way better off. You've solved all of, a lot of your problems, probably your succession issue, because there'll be someone there who wants to take over the group. And it's surprising how it's rarely done. I mean, often because of ego or I don't know.
Sometimes your investors stop you, but at the same time, I found founders who kind of have no choice whatsoever. Like they're at their last breath and they'll die. The company will die. And they still refuse to do that. I find them the same people who struggle in fundraising.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. When I find in fundraising, often it's kind of like if someone wants to get me to sign an NDA before they'll send me the deck is quite a kind of like, what am I going to do with it?
I mean,
and then there are a few of those tells where over the years you kind of learn some of those tells, but I don't know.
I would accept signing an NDA as a VC in very rare cases, but some cases are legitimately valid.
Yeah.
Like somebody they're just going to file for patents.
Yeah.
And for technical DD.
Those completely legit, completely understand. There's a
But for the majority of cases, I agree.
It's just like, I've got a, consumer fintech app, but I don't want to give away the idea. I'm like, I can assure you that 4,000 people also have this idea. And, I don't mind. I'm just curious about
a lot of first-time founders do that.
Yeah.
And like we have this thing, so we have this non-profit community called 2469. And one of the themes of it's a weekly meetup, and one of the nights is called Idea Lab, where people can come and stress test their ideas, and sometimes actually angels end up putting money in just an idea. So somebody accused us for running it as not really a business. It's just a not-for-profit activity that we do in 18 countries.
Yeah.
1.5 million entrepreneurs show up annually to this, unique individuals. And somebody accused us for doing this because we want to steal ideas, which is a bit funny. But like, I think, first-time founders do find it difficult to just talk about their idea.
And I want to talk about one thing is about exits and multi-exits and things like that, because I think the VC industry has kind of propagated this idea of kind of go for billion-dollar outcome, otherwise it's a failure. Don't take the exit, keep going, which of course works with a portfolio entrepreneur.
AKA the power law.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas, my advice, particularly to founders who haven't had an exit, so they haven't, taken some risk off the table, is, take it, and then it will give you the freedom to go bigger. Sometimes, not always. But what's your philosophy around like taking the wins along the way as opposed to kind of going all in and just doing one thing, particularly if you've had 24 companies by now?
If you're a founder, your company is not forever, and you're not in it forever, that's for sure. If you're a good fire starter, you're probably not going to be good to maintain the company, so you're gonna actually have to get out inevitably. And if you are a good maintenance person who can maintain the company, you're like a proper operator, you're probably not a fire starter, so you really have a tough time starting. So there are these things, and it's not, some people are good at both, but very rare.
It's quite rare. Yeah, I agree with you. I meet lots of people who are great at starting things and then they struggle scaling, and then other people who are terrible at starting things but are really good operating.
Like, I'll give you one example. Like Elon Musk, I think, is very terrible at starting things, and that's why he never started any company.
He just buys them and
exactly.
Them, yeah.
I mean, he joined PayPal, he acquired all of the rest of them, but he knew what he's good at and he employed it, and that's smart.
And you think that's the lesson then, which is actually if you know yourself if you can be a semi-objective about then you can think about, look, am I someone who's going to compound this over the rest of my life, or actually am I someone who I should take this to a certain point of fruition, go and start a new thing, and treat it as a kind of career of series of games.
Yeah, and I think there is a huge bringing up and cultural impact that comes into this, but everybody gets the choice. And I see a huge amount of European founders that say, I just want a lifestyle business. And they shouldn't raise funds. They should go.
No, that's great if you're doing that. Yeah, it's not a VC game. No,
but sometimes you don't know. You don't know what you're good at. So the only way to find out is actually to go out and try. And that's why the Triple F exists. For friends, family, and fools, go raise from those. Don't go to a VC fund until you actually find out Not everybody, as you said, or like alluded to earlier, not everybody has to be a founder and start a company.
And final piece of advice for, let's say they've founders who've got past the start phase and they're now really looking to scale up and create a meaningful company and potentially even a group of companies like you've done at Ahoy and over the career. What would your advice be to someone who's not the startup person, but maybe more the scale up person, and now thinking about the next few years and how they should play that game?
That's a difficult one.
Or is it just so contextual? There's no one size fits all.
Honestly, I do think that, but I think there are very basic things that are common. So those are, if you want to exit when the next year is going to be better than this one, not when it's going to be worse, because you will never be able to exit if the next year is worse.
It's so common, isn't it? It's like, last year was awful and I want to exit. That's why I want to exit. Next year's going to be great, so I'm not going to sell the company. And then crazy valuation that you want for it and all of those kind of hindsight and so on and so forth.
That probably is a good story for IPO, by the way.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Carry on, and other things that you see commonly. Exit at the right time. Exit when the wind is in your sails, as opposed to...
Yeah, don't be greedy. Greed is actually, I think, the worst thing ever in life, not just in companies and business. And if you're like a scale up and you think that you're peaking your market, genuinely think about either expanding to other markets, which is like starting off from scratch, or just sell when next year is going to be better. If you're a scale up and you have grand plans to go IPO, it might be good for you. Just consider that it's worse than being acquired, because you will be expected to stay, because if you leave, it might impact the stock price. You're definitely not going to liquidate your equity before you leave. Don't take money from people you can't actually have a fun lunch or dinner with. Definitely don't.
That's a good
take
test,
that.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if you're investing, don't give money to a person you can't enjoy a coffee with.
Yeah.
And I say a coffee and a meal because it's different. So for an investor, just being able to have that coffee, because usually investors have, an Instagram reel sort of attention span because of the amount of things they see. And for founders, they're so passionate that they actually have to kind of bring themselves down to end up having maybe a lunch or a dinner with an investor. So I think this is the balance,
And final question is hope for the ecosystem. So you talked about the state of the golf ecosystem. Now, let's say we're sat here in 10 years' time. What is the hope or the vision for where the golf ecosystem what it could become?
I truly believe if we have very small fragmented markets, if we bring them together, I do believe that there's a very big opportunity to actually lead from the region to the world and give. We have established, energy we exported energy for so many years. We have a lot of engineering here, but also we're complemented with our proximity to Europe that is gifting the world all of their grant programs that are creating amazing science. And then you have that savviness of, the US, business savviness of the US and how they actually, productize. I do think of the world as a beautiful collaboration game rather than, my borders, my country.
Yeah.
And if we look at legacy is bad. Yes, we invented algebra and algorithms here in this part of the world. And I think that it means nothing today. The only thing that matters is what we do forward. And we just need to think of everybody as an equal and treat people with respect and try and actually build a better tomorrow for everyone.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much. It's been great having this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And if you did, then you should get on our list, because we will be sharing exclusive behind the scenes. We'll be sharing more content, more materials. We'll also be sharing who are the upcoming guests, so you can prepare for that, you can ask questions, and you can really start to be part of a community. Head below, click the link, join the list, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.